All right, turning now to Grand Rapids and the news that as of this month, you can now hop a Southwest flight out of Ford International Airport. Now, what's interesting here is what a group called the Regional Airlines of West Michigan has managed to do for Ford Airport over the last 4 years. The group, made up of private funders, headed up by Dick DeVos, has managed to spend millions of privately raised money to improve the airport, attract new carriers, which in turn drove down ticket prices and gives people a viable option outside of Chicago or Detroit to fly into. It's a good read in Cranes this week, but very interesting about how important an airport really can be for a region, and how does this set up Grand Rapids now to do some bigger economic development, I think.
Well, I think this is a product of the growth and our growth Grand Rapids has been experienced in terms of its redevelopment of its downtown, but also as a region, picking up more jobs, picking up more development, more residents, really become a powerhouse in the state. It's not a sleepy little West Michigan town by any means. I mean, they have taken off over the last few years. But, you know, they've brought a lot of colleges, campuses in and to their downtown area. It's you know, I think it's a reflection of what they've accomplished to date, and certainly will give them a boost.
So does it also, oh, go ahead.
Well, and think of how they do things. My wife is from Grand Rapids, so we spend a lot of time there. And if you look at the way they do things there, it is very different than the way we think of things in Southeast Michigan, where we sort of let government take the lead on all of these kinds of things in development and planning. Over on the west side of the state, private interests have more of a out front role, and government is more of a partner, sometimes a secondary partner to that stuff. And so they've been able to get things done that we just keep tripping over ourselves about here. And this is a good example. I mean, you look at this airport project. This was a private idea. Think of how long it's taking us to get the Aerotropolis, which is a wonderful idea. Maybe the best thing Bob Facano's ever done. But think of how much fighting and tripping over ourselves we had to do to get that done, because we had government and the sort of government stuff
and it's still
in the
empty.
way. And it's still, it's not empty, but it's not
basically empty.
Does this also kind of show?
It's got a closed racetrack.
It's got a closed racetrack.
We're getting there. But does it also show that every city needs almost a Dan Gilbert and a Dick DeVos to drive things?
Yeah, it does.
With big money.
With big money, but also with the appropriate government sort of partnership, and there's something about that over in West Michigan that works differently than it does here. And I mean, I happen to think it's because we are much more about government. I mean, government means something very different to us in Southeast Michigan than it does over in West Michigan. And so
we can see which model works better.
Well, it's working better now for them. Now, for 50 years, it worked way better for us. I mean, this is a much better
Not the last 50.
Well,
but now it's a bit of a change. Well, we couldn't leave the show tonight without taking a look at possible intervention into Syria this week and everything that's happened with the U.S. What's been on your mind, Nolan, as you've been watching this unfold?
Well, there are no good options here. We're in a corner. You've got Barack Obama has said, and I think rightly so, that we're not going to tolerate the use of chemical weapons. We can, as a civilized society, tolerate that. And it appears that the Assad regime has used those weapons, and now we have to respond. If we don't respond, if we do what Britain did and said, hey, we don't want to, we don't want to think about this, we're turning our head away from this, what's going to stop Assad from gassing the rest of his rebels? And, oh, by the way, Iran's watching. If we tell Syria, you can't do that, and then say, well, never mind, Iran is going to move ahead with its nuclear ambitions and ignore our threats and warnings.
What's the proper reaction, do you think, here, Stephen?
Well, I think you got to do something, but you've
what?
got to define your goals pretty specifically here. I mean, there's no tolerance in this country right now for another ground war in the Middle East, which, we just extracted ourselves from Iraq and Afghanistan. People are not going to support us going back into Syria for that. And then within Syria itself, are these rebels, part of Al-Qaeda? That's entirely possible. We don't know. But certainly Assad's regime is not supportable anymore. You've got a big sort of mess here that you've got to, I'm looking for the president to articulate a specific set of goals and then sell that to the Congress, as opposed to just saying, well, we got to do something and then ask.
So do you think he'll take any kind of military action to the Congress first, or do you think
he's got to make a case to Congress for his own credibility, because he was a leading voice against George Bush when George Bush didn't do that. Joe Biden stood up and said we need to impeach George Bush because he didn't do that. They can't then go in and do the same thing. But he can't just throw missiles around at empty buildings and call it a day. They've got to do something that's going to work. They may be able to destroy Syria's air power, provide air cover for the rebels, and make a real difference that way without ground troops and without a huge involvement by the U.S.
And the world will be watching. So, gentlemen, have a great weekend. We so appreciate it. And that is going to do it for MiWeek. Make sure you join our growing social community on Facebook and on Twitter so you can stay part of the conversation during the week. And catch up on shows you missed at MiWeek.org. For all of us at Detroit Public TV, have a great weekend. Make sure you come back and see us next week for MiWeek.